I want to ask one more question about the situation that we confront, and you touched on it with the Supreme Court overturning women's fundamental right to abortion. And this, as you said, this sent shockwaves across this country and has been shattering the lives of women and girls on a massive scale already, and worse is to come. And millions of people are outraged by this. Many are terrified about it, but most have no idea, no real understanding as to why this is happening. And it really stands out that you have been analyzing and warning about this and leading people in how to fight against this assault on abortion and what it concentrates for decades. I wondered if you could talk some about what you see concentrated in this fight around abortion and how this relates to the revolution that we need to make.
Well, first of all, you have to understand, why has there been this attack? And yes, it's been an attack on women's right to abortion. Go ask any of the Christian fascists out there who are the stormtroopers for this, and they'll tell you straight up it's about controlling women and getting women to be back in their subordinate position, because in the eyes of these people, they're getting all out of control. That doesn't mean that people who are, trans people who may have the situation where they can get pregnant shouldn't have the right to abortion. Of course they should. But the essence of what's going on here and has been going on for decades is the attack, to forcibly subjugate women even more thoroughly and viciously than they already are discriminated against and violently oppressed under this system. And, but then you have to go deeper. Ask yourself, where did all these Christian fascists come from? I mean, yes, they if you listen to them, they'll often say, that satanic woman, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, went to the Supreme Court in 1962 and challenged the right of schools to carry out prayer in the schools. And the stupid and satanic Supreme Court at that time, before we got a hold of it, that stupid Supreme Court actually went along with it and overturned the right to have prayer in the schools. And ever since they kicked God out of the schools in the early 1960s, because of that satanic woman, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and that terrible Supreme Court, everything has gone to hell in this country. Now, a lot of them will tell you this, or they'll say it even if you don't ask them, and even if you don't want to hear it. But let's go deeper. Where did this whole Christian fascist thing come from, and why? Because there have been, if you go read that Raymond Lotta article on revcom.us that I referred to, Imperialist Parasitism and Social and Class Recomposition in the U.S., if you go read that, you will see, spelled out concretely, that there have been major changes both internationally and within the U.S. in the economy. And one of the major changes has been that because of the reconfiguring of the economy, there's more need for people in professional categories, in the technical, categories and so on. And so this has opened up more opportunity, and together with struggle that's been waged since the 70s in particular against the oppression of women, this has resulted in opening up a lot more of these positions, including, college admissions and so on, to women. I think women now outnumber men in the universities. And so, that has created a situation where a lot of women, it's not that they're no longer oppressed. I mean, just look at the statistics. How many are raped? Look at the massive, pornography, which is just an assault on women as a whole, everywhere. And it's not agency, it's oppression, okay? That's one thing that I can't stand, is when people who don't really want to take on the system at all or in any serious way think they can get over, I don't know whom they're trying to get over on, but other than other people who are also suffering, but they try to get over by rebranding oppression as agency. Sex work, that's agency. No, it's not, it's oppression. It's institutionalized, financialized degradation of women. So just to go on it for a second, because I think this is important. Some of these people say, well, under capitalism, any kind of job you have is exploitative, so what's the difference in sex work? Well, there is a difference. Yes, capitalism is a system based on exploitation, and especially super exploitation of people, including, as I said, more than 150 million children in the third world. But, if you're working in a factory, say in Bangladesh, as a woman producing clothes, you're being exploited in producing those clothes, but the product you're working on and producing is clothes. if you're working in the so-called sex industry, which is just, as I said, vicious exploitation and institutionalized and financialized degradation of women, because what is the product? Besides your exploitation, what is the product? The product is the degradation of women. It's not clothes, it's not food, it's not televisions. The product, besides your exploitation, the product is the degradation of women. That's the whole point of it. And the same in pornography. So, all this is a backlash against these changes that have occurred. The incel phenomenon where men, want to rape women because they can't get women to agree to have sex with them the way they want. I mean, they openly talk about raping women, And this, these are all phenomena that have occurred fundamentally because of underlying changes in the economy, which then interacts with, struggles of people and resulting changes in the social relations. And so a big part of what has been driving this fascist movement is these changes that have resulted in women have a little bit more independence, especially women in the more professional categories. But even women working in lower jobs who have their own income. I remember, I never quite knew what exactly he was getting at with this, but I used to have a record way back in the day when I was in high school of the blues singer Leadbelly. And he introduced he had a song called National Defense Blues because it was about the World War II. And when a lot of, black people came from the South, and one of the first things they did was to get jobs in the war industries, the defense plants. And that included a number of women. And so Leadbelly introduced this song. He said, people come to me, men, he meant men, come to me and say, Leadbelly. And I say, yeah. They say, I can't control my woman the way I used to. And I say, yeah. And they say, well, Leadbelly, they go and work in the defense plant and they got their own money and I can't tell them what to do the way I used to. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, Leadbelly, can't you do something about this? So he wrote the song National Defense Blues, which wasn't exactly about that. But I never quite knew from what point of view he was telling his story. But anyway, it reflects something, and this is happening on a major scale in the last number of decades. So this is a big part of what's driving the fascist movement, is wanting to forcibly, push women and control women back into a subordinated position, even more than they already are under the system, because there's plenty of oppression all the time. But they wanted, back the way it was even before these relatively minor, but real changes have occurred. And so the other thing to understand is the leaders of this Christian fascism, going back to someone like Jerry Falwell, who founded the Moral Majority and founded, Liberty University. Now, one of the things that, I never realized this till I was reading recently. Liberty University is a massive university now. It has tens of thousands of students. And, I like to follow the NCAA tournament championship, but fuck it, here comes Liberty University all of a sudden playing, and I say, anybody, beat these motherfuckers, okay? I don't care. I'll even root for Baylor. Just fuck another bunch of Christian fundamentalists. Just beat these motherfuckers and get them out of this tournament now, okay? But Jerry Falwell founded, that university and got going with the Moral Majority, him and Pat Robertson and all these Christian fundamentalists. And Jerry Falwell, at the beginning, in the 50s, was openly opposed to the civil rights movement. And then he had to do a whole mea culpa. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have opposed that. Well, then he turned around and opposed the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa in the 80s, by the way. So he wasn't that sorry. But what he did recognize, this is tactically unwise. The civil rights movement, the ruling class of this country, because of its needs internationally, is going to make concessions to the civil rights struggle. It's going to, abolish some legal segregation, open up some positions to black people, and, so on and so forth. So he switched gears, and then in the 70s, they concentrated their whole thrust around the oppression of women. They decided this is, one of them openly said, this is a door through which we can get all these, people who are upset about all these things, including the concessions to the struggle against white supremacy. We can get them all by making the thing about abortion so-called killing of babies. And so, this is why they took this up. But again, all this was, what was going on underneath all this was changes in the economy because of the needs of U.S. imperialism to contend in the world, both economically and militarily, because you're military after all. Where does it get its weapons from? Where does it get its logistics from? Where does it get its supplies from? Where does it get its food from? From the economy. So they had a need to contend internationally. And, this is why, for example, if you include China, 80% of the production workers in the world are in the third world. And, here's a statistic that shines light on what I'm talking about. Just a couple of decades ago, a little less than 60% of the clothes that people wear in this country were made in this country. Now it's 1 or 2%. They're made in places like Bangladesh and other places where there are all these garment factories viciously exploiting people, particularly women. So, this was the changes that in turn led to the changes in the U.S. economy where you had more of these professional jobs. And that's why, along with the struggle, there was more opening for women. And this is what has driven this fascist movement. And is why it's taken on this religious cloak, but it's a real thing, this religious fundamentalism. Because if you look at the Bible, I don't care, I know a number of years ago there were these feminists who didn't want to let go of the Bible, and so they wanted to, think about it in terms of things today. They wanted to go through and change all the pronouns in the Bible. So instead of God, would be he, God would be it. Well, here's the problem. You can change all the pronouns, but you can't change the reality. The Bible is a thoroughly patriarchal document from beginning to end, from the book of Genesis all the way through to Paul's epistles and all the rest of it. It's a patriarchal document, horrific patriarchy. In fact, if you look at it, women should be killed for having sex before they're married. If they're not virgins when they get married, you have to show the bloody sheet to prove that they were virgins. First of all, not all women bleed when they first have sex, but leaving that aside, you have to show the bloody sheet, or else the woman should be put to death in the town hall or the town center. This is a patriarchal document, so you can go changing all the pronouns, but you can't change the patriarchy. God is still going to be God the Father, the patriarchal oppressor. This is the way it is. This is the reality. So, this is why this religion was, a useful way to rally all these fascist forces. Because if you took it, look, there are liberals and progressive people who are religious, and some of them do very good things, and we should appreciate that and unite with them as far as possible in the struggle against oppression. And many of them say, look, there's bad stuff in the Bible, just like there's bad stuff in everything. There's bad stuff in communism. There's bad stuff in the Bible, yes, but, we choose to focus on the message of Jesus, which is to do right by the poor and so on and so forth. Okay, they're practicing what I call, salad bar Christianity. They go down the line, I don't like this one here, like children who disobey their parents should be put to death. Oh, no, not that one, but like feed the poor. Yeah, I can go with that, In fact, the Christian fascists practice salad bar Christianity too. If you start challenging them, what about this stuff here? Some of them openly will say that homosexuals should be put to death, as it says in Leviticus. But most of them will say, well, that was the Old Testament, now we got a New Testament. We got a new covenant with God in the New Testament, so that's different. But you go to the New Testament, and Paul is all about women should be subordinate to men. And he links it back to the Old Testament. He links it back to Eve in the garden, when she's the one that got taken in by the snake, and then she misled Adam. So now childbirth is going to be a burden for women because of that. It's all, you go read the Bible if you have time. This is all in there. But so if you're a fundamentalist, what do? You take all the stuff that really leans heavily on this patriarch and these oppressive relations. The Bible defends slavery, for example. Now you see some of these fascists openly saying, well, slavery wasn't really that bad. It did, some of the conditions of the slave improved from how they were living in Africa. Just horrific stuff like this. And I see Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, made a statement where he said, nobody started questioning slavery until the United States was founded with the Declaration of Independence saying that all men are created equal. Well, this is just absolute bullshit, including, as I pointed out before, I think some of the slaves at least were questioning slavery before the Declaration of Independence was written, including in the uprisings of slaves, even during the colonial days before the country was founded. But see, they lean on this Bible and this heavy religious stuff for two reasons. And I know I've gone on, but I'm going to just finish this point. For two reasons. One, because it is heavily patriarchal and it does uphold all kinds of horrific oppressive relations and slaughter of people who don't get with the right God and so on. If you don't believe me, go read the Bible with an open mind. The other thing is religious fundamentalism, and this is true of religion in general, but all the more so of religious fundamentalism, teaches people to be unthinking. It teaches people to accept things, quote unquote, on faith. It teaches them to be slavishly following religious authorities. And so this is if you want to develop a fascist movement, you need legions of unthinking people who are anti-scientific. And you can see it, all the conspiracy, I saw somebody raise an objection about calling conspiracy theories because they're not really theories, but leaving that aside. They don't deserve to be called theories. But leaving that aside, you got all these conspiracy theories, and all the rest of it, all these people, QAnon, all the rest of these people, you need legions of unthinking people if you want a fascist movement. The exact opposite, by the way, of communism, which needs legions of critically and creatively thinking people. So this is why the Christian fundamentalism is such a, powerful and useful rallying cry for all these people who basically their position is, and this is why they said the 2020, and this is the underlying reason why they all believe fervently, with religious zeal, that the 2020 election was illegitimate and stolen from Trump. It's because they regard the people who voted for the Democrats, and we don't want them voting for Democrats, by the way, although in 2020 we did, and we can get into that too if you want. But in general, we don't want them voting for Democrats, but all the people who voted for the Democrats, you can go down the list, gay people, the LGBTQ, women, especially women, and there are lots of women fascists, by the way, we have to recognize, but women, especially thinking women who don't want to be subordinate to men, black people in their overwhelming, Latinos in large numbers, all these people in the eyes of the Christian fundamentalist fascists are illegitimate. So therefore, in their thinking, and it's just barely beneath the surface, if not right on the surface, in their thinking, if those people are the ones, are the reason why the Democrats won the election, then the election's illegitimate. And that's why they believe all these, theories that have been, and assertions and claims that have been disproved about fraud in the election, because it doesn't matter to them, really, if it was fraudulent or not. It was illegitimate because all these people who were not legitimate, not real Americans, not what we want this country to be about, and should be put back in their place as violently as necessary, if not literally wiped out. All those people are the reason why we didn't win the election.
A very important thing to understand, which Bob Avakian gets into further as the interview goes forward, as well as in his other works, is that fully breaking all the chains that bind women and ending all oppression based on gender and sexual orientation requires making revolution, and that the fight to break these chains is a big part of what makes this revolution possible. This is a fight that everyone who wants to get humanity free has to take up, men as well as women and people of all genders. So with that in mind, we want to share a bit more of the conversation that Andy had with members of the Chicago Revolution Club last week about the BA interviews. During a portion of that conversation that we did not broadcast, Roosevelt, a member of the Chicago Revolution Club, shared a harrowing story of a loved one whose life was violently destroyed, along with the lives of her 4 children, by a husband who took up the oppressive patriarchal view towards her that this system fosters. It was a painful story, and outrageously, it is all too common. So coming off that story from Roosevelt, Andy asked him to talk further about the importance of breaking with this view on women and the struggle that we need to wage around this. So we're going to play what Andy asked Roosevelt and his response.
I'm still a little bit seething about this situation, seething inside about with Roosevelt talking about his niece and all this and this patriarchy. Let's, I think Bob Avakian says we have to, in this interview, we have to struggle like hell with people over what they're into. And if people watch I think it's in the second interview where we talk about that you can't be against oppression except you want to hold on to the oppression of women. And he speaks to that and said, these are not we can't have these terms out there. And let's be clear that the system puts these terms on people, but there's people out there, right? We spent a summer out there with you in Chicago on the South Side. There's people out there arguing for that. There's the Nation of Islam headquartered right there, right near that center, where they treat their women as property. You got the Black Israelites out there now. Besides their anti-Semitism and overall anti-white thing, they've got a whole thing about a patriarchy. It's for men, and that's the same shit that you see going on in Iran, that the people are rising up against. I mean, people got to listen to that second, all three interviews. But in that second interview, he says that the terms can't be who's the fucker and who's the fucky. We got to get beyond all that, and we got to struggle with these youth about this. We got to struggle with everyone about it, because this is unnecessary. It's horrific, and it takes a toll on the people, and it demoralizes them. And if people would rise above that, it would change things. So I'd like to just talk a little bit more about like how we're going to go out and, I know you guys have waged some struggle against some of this BS from the NOI at different times, but it's not just them. It's in all this fundamentalist religion of every kind, and we got to emancipate people's thinking. So everybody has said we got to struggle with people, and this is exactly one of the questions we got to struggle very hard with masses of youth, particularly these young boys and young men who this is the one thing they want. They watch this hip hop. It's all over it. It's all over it. Woman hating.
The thing with patriarchy, that's ingrained, or has been ingrained within the psyches of people, as we know for thousands of years, but for hundreds of years. And breaking away from that type of shit, man, requires a lot. It requires a lot of work, in trying to get someone to change their thinking, on that type of bullshit, because they would look inside they would say that as a matter of fact, that's something that BA spoke about too, is about Paul, about the Bible and reading Paul. And I think that was in the second interview. So, that's why all three of these interviews are really important, and talking about how, how under Christianity, under Islam, they all have their roots, that they all back up, the oppression of women. And, we need to get into, the whole thing about breaking the chains, and unleashing that mighty fury, women as a mighty force of revolution everywhere, as BA said, called for. And when you get them, when you get some people like myself, for instance, I got to throw myself up under that, because I was deeply into it. Passing out tracts when I was a youngster, those are little Bible pamphlets on the bus, passing them out, probably until I was probably around 15 or 16 years old, going up and down buses and trains and walking up to people, and doing that. And then later becoming a Sunni Muslim, an Orthodox Muslim, which is unrelated to the Nation of Islam, but still, it's still just the same, as oppression of women, is deeply ingrained in both of them and in all areas, and studying the Bible and the Quran as intensely as I have, over the years, and making it so that every woman in my in my family knew what I was about. And even if you wasn't in my family, you knew what I was about. And the woman was going to be subjected to doing what I tell them to do, And that was what that was my mindset, just like many others. In Islam, when we do prayers, we do not do ablution, mean washing of ourselves. We do not wash our hands or our feet. At the same time, the woman gonna do it after me. When she pray, she's gonna pray behind me. And make sure that there's a covering, a cloak behind me. That subjugation, is so strong. That it's an extremely difficult thing to bust through from. But when you look at, when you come into the understanding of equality and not making, the woman, subjugated to you, and seeing her as an equal partner, that balance, is equal, you could get away from that shit. You don't want to, subject this person to that type of hardship, because your mind is fucked up, on this religious crap, and I don't, I don't want to, sound like I'm bashing, religion, but I'm just calling it out for what it is. First of all, I don't believe in it. I could prove, that there's proof that a lot of this shit didn't happen or wasn't happening. No museums is going to back that shit up, on certain levels. So, but anyway, to say that, opening one's eye and opening one's eyes and to a broader picture, to even see, what's going on in Iran, is fucked up. What's going on in Bangladesh with, is fucked up. What's going on, here, in America is fucked up when the courts have ruled, that women are not equal to men and the women are subjected to do what they tell them to do, and take control of their bodies the way that they have, that's fucked up, so if you can't stand up and recognize that this is, not the system that you want to support, that you want to break away from this system, it's time for you to get with this, with this Rev Club and move forward.
As Roosevelt said, it is time for you to get with the Revolution Club and move forward. Go to revcom.us to learn how to get involved. And one of the key things that the Revolution Clubs and all the RevComs and all those who want to see a different world need to be taking up right now, and a critical way to support and strengthen this work, is to take up the fund drive that we are going to hear more about next. So let's now go to Pete in the seat.